Hello and welcome back around the bonfire. I don't have anything quippy today. The Fire won and Detroit City is about to lose. Hopefully, it's John and Tim back. Another episode of the bonfire. Another day to sit here talk a little Chicago Fire football as the weather seems to have finally turned. Three home games in a row feels weird, but it's nice to say all of them were wins. Tim, it's Monday night. Am I
Wait,
wrong? You just gave me such a
I
look.
think it was two home games in a row, right?
No, Philadelphia was a home game, wasn't it?
Nope.
That's where my brain is at, folks.
Did
So
your
yeah.
did you teleport to Chester, Pennsylvania, and not
Well, you know
realize
what
it?
it is they just walloped him so badly it felt like a home game. That's what it is, Tim.
Fair enough.
Um,
Yep. Because the whole storyline part of it was like, the Fire hadn't won in Detroit in 13 years, and
yeah,
now they have.
as when I saw your face, I was like, oh, but hey, anywho, 3 wins in a row is 3 wins in a row, and I'll take that any day of the week. We're excited to be back. Talk a little bit of Chicago Fire football. Tim, how are you? I have to ask you this every time because otherwise we'll never know. It's an important note to check on your friends, folks.
It's yeah, I'm sure it's what all the listeners are dying to know. I'm good. I'm good. The weather's great. Love some midweek football. Love the Fire being in another competition. Even though like Tuesday seems kind of early, and I think poses some interesting challenges. But hey, I think it'll be interesting to see who plays. I mean, it's going to be day of recording as we're coming out, so that'll be exciting. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, yeah. Let's say we'll talk about that later. But I think in some ways we're looking forward to that a little bit more than recapping this game as good as it was. Fire with with their second straight 1-0 win off the back of a Maren Haile-Selassie goal. But before we get into that, couple key notes of news. The first, obviously, as we mentioned, Chicago Fire taking on Detroit FC in Detroit for the U.S. Open Cup. That is day of release, April 14th, 6:30 p.m. Central. Again, remember, 6:30 p.m. Central, 7:30 p.m. local. So if you're seeing 7:30, that's incorrect. It's 6:30, so don't miss the first hour of the game like some people have been known to do.
And if anybody is driving to Hamtramck, Michigan, remember you're going to lose that hour. Just because it's 7:30 there does not mean that it's going to be. You can't just subtract from the kickoff time and add the drive-in and whatever, and yeah, it
Yeah.
won't work.
And
It
hey,
won't
look,
work.
if you are heading in there for the game, I'm so sorry, and I hope everything is okay. I'm sorry you have to be there, but no, hey, look, we love some midweek footy. The other thing to point out, Mbekezeli Mbokazi officially on Team of the Match Day on the bench. A little disappointing, Tim. I don't know if you do you get a vote in the Team of the Match Day, or am I pulling that out of nowhere?
Not the team of the match day. That is selected.
Okay,
In the player of the match day, yes. So
gotcha. It just feels like every Team of the Match Day is just like, did you score? All right, get in there, champ.
come on, don't you know goals drive progress? Presented by
All
Audi.
right. I think it's more like
Um,
goals. It's four
yeah.
O's, Tim. You got to get that right.
Oh boy, yeah, yeah, because we don't want to lose all that sponsorship money that Audi is not giving us. Although, look, if they want to talk, I think they'll find that our rates are very reasonable.
Our rates are
Um,
two Audi R8s. That's all we need, Audi. All right. I'll even say it the right way. I don't know if I do. Is it Audi? Is it Audi? Who knows? Who cares?
Audi. No, that'd be more
Okay.
Swedish.
All right.
Um,
I'm gonna mute you. This needs to be like around the horn where I can mute you and award myself points.
that's the format we need to use for hot takes. I swear to God. Um,
That's a good idea. That's a good idea. All right. Let's talk a little bit of the game that actually happened, right? As mentioned before, the 1-0 win for Chicago Fire, all hinging on the boot of Maren Haile-Selassie. A great interplay from Leo Baoso and Philip Zinkernagel down the right side. Jonathan Bamba just controls the ball right into Maren's lap. He takes it first time, buries it in the far right corner, and there was nothing that Atlanta could do to stop him. I think a really nice culmination for Maren and what has been a really nice start to the season for him. So great to see him get the goal. Great to see him perform well. A couple yellow cards in there too, but that was kind of the key point of the game, Tim.
yeah, and look, it was a fantastic ball from Philip Zinkernagel into Jonathan Bamba, who kind of received it on his wrong side. Did one of those things that I think only Jonathan Bamba can do. And the weird thing about Bamba's game is that he does it a lot, but you don't think about it because it doesn't result in goals often enough. And he takes it, he in one fluid motion is able to turn and get it to Maren, who is dead center in the box. And he just has time and space, and he does a good job to get on the end of it. But like it's Bamba made it easy for him, and I think that if it's pretty much any other Fire player that is in that spot, that goal doesn't happen, at least doesn't happen that way.
Yeah, look, it almost feels like you and I think preseason were both very high on Jonathan Bamba and what he could be this year, and it almost feels like because he's still doing a lot of the things he did last year, which has led to every episode. It seems like we're not going to talk about Jonathan Bamba a lot, but gosh, he was great. You know, it just seems like every week he's not the star of the show, but he's making everyone else so much better.
Yeah, and look, I still don't think he's been great, and I still think that if you could make a case that for being the most expensive player on the roster by a country mile, I mean, when you don't factor in transfers and stuff like that, which obviously you have to, um, you could say that he's still not quite performing at the level you would expect. But he's definitely doing more than he was last year. And look, let's just get back to like the real star of this, which is Maren Haile-Selassie. He's had
Mm-hmm.
already got about half as many minutes as he did all of last year. He's already approaching his start total from last year, and a lot of that obviously is just because of who hasn't been available kind of in front of him, and sort of like necessity being the thing forcing it there. But like he is making the most of his minutes, and I think that you're just seeing the kind of player he is, his versatility, how technically strong he is. And he's just like, look, I've said this a bunch of times. He's just a fun player to watch. Like his movement on and off the ball, he's just a fun guy to watch on the pitch. And ultimately, soccer is supposed to be fun.
100%. I mean, look, we've talked about him. We had Joe Lowry on for our preseason kind of predictions and talking what the Fire could look like this year. And the one of the big things he said was like Maren Haile-Selassie, one of the top level subs in MLS, right? One of the guys who you could see starting on a number of teams in MLS, and he's shown that throughout the year. And we talked about it, I think, briefly last week, and we downplayed it a little bit because obviously we've talked a lot of things to death here, but there is kind of the question to be asked of like Maren's starting right now because Hugo Kuipers is out. We've seen him play a little bit in that second striker outside of that. We've seen it back to back weeks now. Him and Robin Lod kind of both playing in kind of a false nine. Nobody's really a true nine up top. But he's excelled in that role, and frankly, he's excelled everywhere he's played. So I guess the question kind of comes back to now, like, where do you see him fitting in when the lineup is back at full strength, right? Because Hugo Kuipers will be back, and as good as Maren has been, you can't not start Hugo Kuipers. He's arguably the best player on the team.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there would be a lot of arguments with that, but
Yeah,
I see your point,
I
right?
said
Like
arguably.
Hugo is a starter, right? And I don't think that Greg Berhalter wants to play out of a 4-4-2 for the rest of the year, or any more than he really has to be honest. Um, I honestly, I wish that I could change my answer, but this doesn't really change, I think, my assessment of where he is on the depth chart. I wish that it did, but like at the end of the day, do you think that he is a better winger than, Joe Bamba or Philip Zinckernagel? And if the answer to that is no, then where he fits into the lineup is off the bench.
Can can I push back a little bit because I think I'm always open to being wrong. I think you're asking the wrong question, right? Which is not is he better than I don't think it's is he better than Phil? Is he better than Bamba? Because I agree with you. I mean, certainly not at what you ask your starting, assumingly going 90 minutes winger to do. But I think that look, I think you look at your 20 something players, you say who are the best 11? How can I get them on the field at the same time? And right now, the answer to that question is if Hugo Kuipers comes back, I think you start Maren Haile-Selassie right behind him. You want to call it kind of a false nine, a fake 10, whatever it is, right? We've seen Robin Lod doing this, right? Kind of moving in between all three spots along the front line. I I think we've seen enough from Maren at this point to think he could do that effectively in a different role. And frankly, I think he's earned the chance. Like Robin Lod has not been playing this great level of soccer this year, and that's not even anti-Robin Lod. I think he's suffering from what Maren has suffered from at times. Like he's just playing a million positions. He's not getting a lot of consistent run. It's tough to adapt. I don't think you can just shut it down that quickly, I guess is my
I point taken. I think that Robin Lod has had a overall disappointing season. I mean, I think that he is disappointed with how his, time in Chicago has gone so far. I think that he's suffering also in addition to those things. I think that it looks like he may be suffering with a bit of an injury that he hasn't fully been able to recover from. And maybe that, to your point, like maybe that does mean you need to give him time off. I am not sure that you see Marin progressing the ball as a creative playmaker that much or enough to the point that you think that he is better at it than Robin Lod. Look, I hope that I'm wrong about that. I just what I've seen from him in the past two games, as good as it's been, I haven't been seeing him do that. And again, that hasn't been the job description, so like it's not like we gave him a chance to show that to us and we didn't see it. It's that's not the role he was given, and so I don't think it's fair to say we haven't seen that. So look, you know what? If it is going to happen, kind of muddling the waters with what we're talking about in the order, like maybe it is something that you see trialed out against Detroit City, who are a absolute top tier defensive team in the USL Championship. So it's not MLS, but like outside of giving it to him against an MLS team, and then you're like, oh well, you gave it to him against an MLS team, but it was Orlando City who cough up 5 goals, on the way to breakfast. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, they are on
No.
track to allow triple-digit goals this season. You know what I mean? And then you're like, oh well, Maren did it, but it was against Orlando City. And then you're like, okay, well, Maren or like whatever, like the Fire already played Philadelphia. Like they did it, but it's against a Philadelphia team that like you can say whatever you want, and or you did it and it was against a good team, and like you could always make excuses like that. I mean, this just seems like an ample opportunity to do it, and you don't necessarily say it'll translate directly, but you try it out.
I think the interesting thing too there, look, we saw Greg Verhalter towards the end of 2025 saying, like, my team is not built to play a 4-3-3 right now. As much as I would love them to, we just can't win games like this, or we can't win at the level we would like to. So we're going to switch it up. And look, maybe it's not for the entirety of 2026, because I think we would both agree that even with the injuries, like when Andre Franco is healthy, you expect him to start, and I guess fully healthy, right? He'll have some kind of ramp up period. And so maybe the question is now, hey, until the World Cup, do we maybe stick to this 4-4-2 if it means we get continued dynamic play from Maren Haile-Selassie? Because the one thing, and I hadn't thought about this until you said it, so I apologize you couldn't like prep for it, but like you mentioned the idea of like Maren is not somebody who can progress play in the ways, an Andre Franco can, just for an example. That is something we've seen from Hugo Kuipers at time, is dropping deeper and allowing guys to get ahead of him. And that is one thing Maren does very well, is find that space and break lines. And I wonder if that could be I think when we talked about this, you've seemed reluctant to pair Hugo in a front two, and I guess I see potential benefits there. So I'm curious your reluctance.
I I think that as a second striker, maybe Maren does. I mean, we've seen what he can do, right? I think that the challenge is, as good as Hugo is at scoring goals, the thing that he's not as great at as you might expect from someone of his goal scoring prowess is headers. Not that he's like completely worthless in the air or anything like that. It's just he doesn't do it at
It's just
anything
not
close
what
to
he
the level. I think he
does.
does a lot of his other stuff, and I don't think that Maren gives you much more than that. And I mean, on top of everything else, he just is not that tall.
Yeah. Neither of
Um,
them are aerial players.
yeah, and so again, like I don't. I mean, I could still, but as like a false nine and stuff like that, sure. At the same time, I'm not sure that if they're both on the pitch, you necessarily defend against them as in as a false nine in the same way. And I kind of do wonder if you have you can draw up a lineup however you want. Like you can like put players in rows. Like that's not the way the game plays. And I think in practice, what we would see would end up feeling more like that 4-3-3 that you talked about in some ways. Of Maren would be playing deeper and centrally, and his job would be to progress the ball and not so much to be doing those things. And like, look, he can do some of the false nine things of like dragging defenders towards him and stuff like that when he's coming into the box, and he's fast and he's able to get past guys, and that would be worth seeing. I mean, it's a look. It's a good problem to have. And on the whole, it is a problem that I am glad is not mine. Um, but I think look, your point about Robin Lod, I think is well taken. Like he has been struggling, and he's got a long term deal with the Fire, and we know long run how good he has been in MLS. I don't think that because he is not doing everything you necessarily would hope that he would be doing for your team right now doesn't mean he won't do it. Just he's not doing it right now, and then you give someone else who has been doing a lot the chance.
Yeah. So one point on Robin, kind of before we move on, and that is, like I said it before, and I kind of do want to drive home to what you said at the end there. Like I long term have no concerns about Robin Lod and what he can be for this team. I think right now you mentioned the potential of a nagging injury. this is also the first time he's played in MLS outside of Minnesota, right? That is a massive change. And we've talked about players settling into new teams and new leagues, but, it's an entirely new system, even for a veteran player. And it may just be, hey, he needs half a season to get his feet under him. And right now, maybe the better answer is he does that by coming off the bench. And, still the guy who comes in and plays 30 minutes in every game, just maybe I do wonder if he's just missing some consistency, I guess is maybe the best way I can say it.
Yeah, I mean, look, it could be a variety of factors, and I think we don't have great insight into it. We just, we can see that things are not 100% clicking for him right now. And again, if they're clicking for somebody else, maybe that does mean you shift roles, at least for now. And like, look, he had a very, very, very good look at goal. He was not able to get it in.
That was
So
tough.
the kind of thing where like he could have literally smacked it in with pretty much any part of his body if he'd made contact with a goal, and it would have looked like a sitter and put the Fire up by a second goal at that point, and didn't happen. And like that happens to everybody, so it's not to like make everything hang on that one moment, but I think that is sort of like, it just feels so much like the way that his season has gone, that maybe some kind of a change does need to be made, even if it's mental with him. Again, it could be recovery, it could be changing the role, simplifying the game, and he hasn't been playing in his best position, so
Mm-hmm.
could be a lot of things, but maybe a change is warranted.
Yeah. Well, hey, look, let's not be so negative. The game was won. The Fire did is the third win in a row, right? A little bit of a winning streak here for Greg Berhalter and co. None of these wins at full strength. Now, granted, two of not the best opponents, and then one of maybe the best opponent, right? Kind of weird in that context in terms of going Philadelphia, Nashville, and then Atlanta. Look, the Fire now, I mean, look, they're second in the East. They're fifth in the Shield standings. And it's interesting. You mentioned something a bit ago, just talking kind of differences from last year. We talk about these games, back-to-back 1-0 wins. And it really does feel like the two weak points of the Fire in 2025, those being, kind of the strength around the edges of the roster, the depth, and the defense have kind of carried the day, right? No Hugo Kuipers, Maren Haile-Selassie and Robin Ludd, maybe not equal amounts, but pulling the weight, right? Joe Waterman stepping in, Jack Elliott stepping in after facing an injury, right? A lot of guys who you weren't expecting to see play making big moments. And it does feel like kind of a stark difference from 25 to 26 in that respect.
So, look, do you remember what the Fire's record was after 7 games, the same point in the season last year?
Not that different, right?
Yeah. It was 3-2-1, and now it's 3-1-2 if you're doing things properly and putting draws in the middle and losses at the end. So they are 2 points ahead of where they were last year. And like on the other side of it, things look really different, right? Like if you look at like the number of goals for, the number of goals against, like they hadn't had a clean sheet at that point. They had allowed 4 goals against the Crew, and then I think 2 goals in the Red Bulls, yes, and then I think DC United in that what became a draw. And I think all the rest were just a 1-1 win or draw against Montreal, and then a couple, like 3 wins on the road, right? And that kind of got the Fire up to the road form. So like it's not that radically different than where the Fire were last year, and then they struggled for a little bit. Like that embarrassing loss to Nashville came a few games later, and then they kind of righted things after that, and it sort of balanced out. I think that this seems like a better team, and I think it seems like the Fire are actually at a higher plateau. And that's not just because the defensive stuff feels more sustainable, I think, than some of the stuff you were starting to see from the Fire on offense then. And look, last year the Fire, like, they had to sign Sam Williams to a first-team contract because they just did not. They used both of his, short-term call-ups, and they like did not have bodies in the pitch. And that's not a referendum on anything about Sam Williams. That is just something the team had to do, and Sam Williams is now out on loan, which I think says a lot about where the Fire overall estimate his level is. So,
Yeah, no, well put. And I think again, it's almost more a feeling than anything else, right? But if nothing else, I think maybe it just instills some confidence, right? Of here were the 2 biggest issues we had in 2025, and it's a short sample size, or a small sample size, I should say, but like through 6 games, it seems they have been not entirely, but mostly fixed, right? And you're seeing that in some of the numbers, right? Chris Brady, all of his advanced stats have improved. His positive on his X goals prevented, or whatever that number is
hard
supposed
not
to be
to be
negative.
hard not to be when you've had 4 clean sheets.
Yeah. Oh,
You know, and like, yeah, but again, like going from no clean sheets to 4 clean sheets, and like one of my issues with a lot of the goaltending stats, including advanced stats, is like they, even if you look at like post shot expected goals models, it that's based on where the shot was taken and where it ends up on frame, and like that tells you a lot, but it doesn't tell you everything because it doesn't tell you why the goalkeeper, what, like where was the goalkeeper before, where was the shot taken, and like were they somewhere they knew was not the ideal spot because they thought they had to cover too many possibilities because the defense had broken down in front of them, right? And there's like a lot of other stuff around that you could. So there, most stats that even look like individual stats are actually team stats in some
yeah.
way. You know, like completed passes and stuff like that's always my favorite one because it's like it actually does take 2 players for that to happen, right? Um,
Got to go towards
like
the ball, Tim.
dude, you could have the like best passers in the world giving me short distance passes, and like your completion stats would fall apart because I'm not going to receive those passes well, right?
Tim, you're
Um,
talking to Chicago sports fans. I think they all know about dropping passes.
man.
Yeah. Look,
Um,
I think we'll talk I think a bit more about the defense when we talk a little bit of everybody's favorite South African.
so yeah, but
I
my overarching point on
mhm.
this is like the team feels better this year.
Yeah.
I think, you know.
The one question I kind of want to pose, and we don't need to get too far in, and part of it may be no Hugo Kuipers certainly affects things. The stat I thought was really interesting and kind of glaring. There are, I think, what, nine or 10 teams in MLS with 12 or more points at this point. Only 2, Chicago Fire and Seattle Sounders, have less than 10 goals for. Right, the Fire sitting at 9 right now, and we've talked a bit here and there about what is kind of going on with the attack. I don't know how much longer you can look at it and say, hey, everything's cool here. We're good. It's just going to take a little bit of getting into, because as good as I think Mbekezeli Mbokazi has been, as Jack Elliott is, Andrew Gutman is playing like the best left back in MLS. At a certain point, those goals need to come, right? You don't need 65, but you need more than 9.
Yeah, and it's not just that you need more than 9. It's if the it looked like the stuff was there for the goals to happen and the goals hadn't happened. That is when you still say small sample size and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't feel like what's been going on with the Fire. Like we've talked about it. I've written about it, especially with the 5 things column. It's felt like the chance creation is not there at the same level that it's been, and we've talked about why a lot too, right? The Fire doesn't have someone that is getting the ball into dangerous places in the right way. Philip Zinkernagel is a versatile player, but like pulling him out of a position where he was like literally had an all-star season, broke the team's offensive records for goal contributions with the 15 goals and 15 assists. Like pulling him away from that, you end up losing more than you gain. But Zink in that position is not going to create things on his own. He's not going to be scoring things on his own because he needs like the ball needs to get to him, and you need someone to do that. And like that's been the challenge. I thought the 2 times the Fire have been able to play something close to the 3-3 that I think would be Berhalter's favored formation in the way that you would expect the team to be playing when everyone's healthy. It's looked better. It still looks like, I mean, again, we talked about Ruben Lode's struggles, and it basically falls on him because like that's the role he's been asked to play. Now, well, I said 4-3-3. You could say it's a 4-2-3-1-2.
Yeah, we're
Like it's the same thing. Double pivot with, and whatever it is, like the thing that's missing is still the same. And maybe Maren helps you in that way to some extent. Um, maybe, like there's not frankly that many more games. Like their Fire are 7 games into the season, and I think it's what they have 8, I believe, left before the World Cup break, and then you both get a transfer window as well as Andre Franco healthy. Although again, like we don't know what exactly healthy means yet, so it's not like you haven't gotten the results. But I also think at the same time, being second um, in the East doesn't like the Fire could lose next week and like they could fall as low as ninth. Like that would require all the teams below them getting points, but like that just shows how early it is. It's a congested schedule, and like this is ending with me sounding way more down on the Fire than I actually am because I do think that they're a much better team, and I do think that like I don't know if they're going to finish second in the East, but they feel like a team that should be at least gunning for one of the top 4 spots in the East. And part of that's because no team in the East looks anything close when valuable. And part of it's because I think the Fire have just taken a couple of big steps up in ways that will improve results over the course of a 34 game season.
Yeah, no, well said. And look, I think the we talked preseason about the East is a little bit of a gauntlet, and a little bit of it's a little more even, I think, than the West in some ways, just in terms of when you have better teams, they take points off each other, so it's hard to have somebody who rises above. Looking at the
And
rest of
at
the
this
table, it's like
point,
who do you have below you, right? It's Miami, who has, despite winning 4 games, they don't look like themselves, right? You have NYCFC, Charlotte, who you feel confident against because of, at this point, the record, right? Like they kind
and
of own
I
them.
I think Charlotte have always performed really close to their ceiling, and that's like getting wins against teams that are just not that good, and they don't really do a lot other than that. And I think, like, look, part of that's their record against the Fire, but part of that's just if you look at their record in knockout competitions where they actually are facing solidly better teams and must wins, they haven't done anything. So I think that
Yeah.
says a lot about it.
Well, and now
Um,
Zaha's going back to Europe too, unfortunately.
man, he's
Supposedly.
yeah, he's Wilfred Zaha, dude.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Anyways,
Anyways,
anyway,
look. So your point about the East being a gauntlet, I think that we all felt that way coming in. Like we knew that the Union were going to take a step back. We, I guess, assumed when you look at the pieces they lost and what they added, it's bizarre that I think everyone, including myself, was like they'll be a comfortable playoff team, and like why we thought
it's
like what because you can
it's
just
the
like
inverse of 25.
exactly, and it's like why we thought that one of kind of soccer that a lot of guys don't like playing long term was going to be sustainable. Although the Union have played it long term, and like any of their academy kids have grown up playing it, and so it's all they know. Um, but like the gauntlet of the East is looking very laid down and rusty, and maybe abandoned on the floor at this point because no team looks perfect. The team that's looked closest in 2026 has been Nashville, and the Fire just beat them. I mean, look, it wouldn't at all be surprising if it was a different story for the game in Nashville. And I mean, I'm not saying the Fire are going to lose it, but like, I don't think the Fire beating them once necessarily changes how difficult of a game that's going to be. Um, but I think they're the only team that you're like, they have stuff figured out and are clicking. NYCFC is probably second, but like, end of the day, I don't think NYCFC has the high end talent to
You
really
you mean
challenge
to
the
tell
top.
me a coaching change won't make everything better for CF Montreal, Tim?
Yeah, they're going to be now they've named another interim head coach 7 games of the season. They're going to win the Shield.
What's the old adage? If they do it with you, they'll do it to you. Unfortunate line for Marco Donadell. All right, let's talk about the reason why everybody actually tuned in. Uh, the man, the myth, the legend, the South African himself, Mbekezeli Mbokazi, putting up another stunning performance. Some may say he how do I phrase? He was voted player man of the match, excuse me, by the fans in the stadium. A wonderful picture with Colin the gentleman, always with the South African flag. That cracked me up. I thought it was the funniest thing. But great, great to see a little bit of recognition for him. Although once they announced fans were voting on that, I think that was obvious what would happen. Also got team of the match day bench nods. Look, I think it's curious here. Look, the big question that's been floating around on social media, right, has been how long could this kid be here? And I think we've been a little bit, I don't want to say down, but we've been pumping the brakes a little bit on him because he does still have a lot to grow. And you had mentioned before, Jack Elliott spoke and kind of referred to him as a raw player, right? A raw talent, which bodes well for him. But I guess I'm just sorry. I'm taking forever to get to the point of how much longer do we have with the South African phenom.
Yeah, and I think that's a question that's been asked a lot. Look, what I said in a comment online, I think is kind of what I'm standing by with this, which is I think that you think he pretty much every World Cup, there's like some young player that a lot of people haven't heard of before that everyone has heard of after the World Cup. And I don't think that South Africa are in a position to really be making a ton of noise at the tournament, but I think Mbokazi could still be that guy, right? Um, so having said that, And like the reason I'm saying that is that can lead to a Godfather offer, right? Of like something that is so good that neither the Fire, like Mbowazi and his agent decide that they want to take it, and the Fire it's such a good offer that like the Fire just don't feel like they're in a position to say no, either to themselves because of the money, and to Mbowazi because you if that's what they're offering, it's like, look, they have met any reasonable valuation that I am ever going to get. Why aren't you letting me go? Why are you holding me back? And then you're a team that's holding a guy back. And long run, the Fire need to be a team that like to get the next Mbowaze in and to develop the reputation. They need to be a team that says we will help you develop and we will let you move on when the time is right, assuming that we get reasonable offers for you. And like that's just what you have to do at this point in the ecosystem. Like I don't love everything about it. Like I wish that we could be saying, oh well, we want to make it to a UEFA Champions League spot, and but like that's not a competition that the Fire can enter, and so like it just is a reality where you are in the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we talked about this a little bit beforehand. I think I think there's two possibilities here. One, which is the one you just laid out, right? Which is the ultimate. Well, I guess technically there's three. One being the one you laid out, which is just very much like, hey, we can't say no to this. It's too much money for both club, for player, and hopefully it will also be a good situation. I think the second option that I may be leaning towards a little bit out of blind optimism, which is I think we were not maybe giving Mbowaze and his agent, who I apologize, I don't have her name in front of me and I should, not enough credit for this move, right? I think if he's playing in South Africa right now, he is not growing as a player, and I think he is hurting himself for the World Cup. I think this 6 months is bigger than people realize, and that it may be what ultimately gets him to the Premier League, to La Liga, whatever it is. I think the other side of the coin is if they're, how do I phrase this well? Like if they are apt enough to do that, I think there's a chance we see him longer than we expect to.
And
I'm not saying
that comes down to
2029. Like
so
if let me finish my thought. Like the money can't be better anywhere other than the top 3 leagues in the world, right? If the Fire really wanted to keep him. So the idea that you're going to sell to Chelsea this summer or this winter, and he's going to, as you mentioned to me earlier, Tim, turn into an unfortunate situation like Gaga Slonina, where you get loaned around and around
and that's exactly it.
and never
So what
develop.
happened with Gaga Slonina is that he told us he was very comfortable with like he and his agent were very comfortable with the plan that Chelsea had laid out for his development, and they gave a very large transfer fee for him. They offered to pay him, I mean, multiples of what pretty much any MLS goaltender has a right to make, like well into DP money territory, if he was staying here and through I think like 2028 or something. And this move was years ago now. Um, but so for Gaga Slunina, that's an insane amount of money. The trick is for his agent, that's also a very large amount of money, and it really depends on who your agent is. And there gets to be a point where your agent doesn't necessarily have your best interest at heart because that's a payday for your agent as well as for you. And if you have the right agent, there's some agents that are big enough in the world where like a contract the size of Gaga's, from Chelsea is not going to turn the dial one way or another in what they think, and it's in their interest then to just do the right thing for the player's long-term development because they're not just concerned about that move, they're concerned about the move after that and their reputation. If that's not the situation you're in, you sometimes get agents that get wowed. And look, I'm not going to lie, Chelsea, part of their model and the part of the model of other clubs that are bringing in young players is they tell you that they have a plan for how you're going to develop, and they make players and their agents feel confident that it's the right place to go. Because if you don't feel that, then you're not going to sign. And it doesn't always work out. And Gaga was loaned out to Belgium. I think that they kind of forgot he was there. He was loaned out to League One and didn't play super well there. And I mean, League One, he didn't have anything close to the support he would have in terms of coaching, trainers, and all that he would have, in Chicago or frankly a lot of other places. And then after I think this year he's played once for the U23 team for Chelsea, and I think now he's aging out of that. So like, or he's about to. Like and Chelsea can only loan so many players, so like he's just not going to be worth another loan to them, and who knows, right? It's not a great situation for him to be in, and that's the trap. I think that what we've seen just from the fact that Mbowazi came here is that he and his agent I think have acted smarter than that, and if they continue to do so, I think that they realize it's not just about making a move where they are getting what I think Chelsea or any team in the Premier League, La Liga, the Bundesliga, most teams in the Liga even would think of as a raw talent that they can mold. They have to think this is a guy that we're confident in. And so if he makes a mistake, he gets a second chance, which like if Gaga made mistakes in the wrong moment, he wasn't going to get a second chance.
Yeah, no, well put. And I told you earlier, Tim, I could see this being a situation where, like I said, we see him stay longer than we expect to. And in my mind, I think that summer of 28 is an interesting point in time, right? I wouldn't be shocked if the Fire don't want to move on from him this winter, and if the offer doesn't come in the summer, I don't see a big money move like that happening in the
And again,
winter.
I was just opening the possibility of there being that Godfather offer. Those are coming a lot less, I think, now because every team has like every nanosecond of like video from every player that's ever played because that's what the internet has done for us. So it's not like there's unknowns as much, right? And even if
Mm-hmm.
somebody has a good tournament, you're not like, oh, that's what this guy does all the time. You have people that look at the video going back and you say like, how consistent is this? And you adjust for the competition level. Like there's so much scouting out there now that I think that those moves are less likely to happen. I'm just saying you can't rule out the possibility. I
Oh
think
no,
it's remote,
I
but you
agree
can't rule it out.
completely. Like, look, if he starts for South Africa and they make it to the knockouts, maybe even win a knockout game, right? Who knows with how big this field is, anything is possible. Like 100% agree. I think what I've seen a lot of people say is like, oh, he won't be here next year. And I think outside of that Godfather offer type situation, like I don't know that it's going to be enough to have 6 months in MLS plus a World Cup. And then I don't think you're making that move in the winter. And then at that point, it's like, how much do we trust the sprint season? I think this could go longer than people think, is all I mean to say.
Honestly, I think leaving after the sprint season may be the time that I had penciled just sort of in for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Just because one, winter moves are less likely in general. There's a smaller market. There's fewer teams that are doing it, and like those teams are frequently not really shopping for center backs. Now, like that doesn't preclude a like sign and then loan back to the Fire for the sprint season, but like that still would mean he would be here for the first half of 27. Um, we're also I'm hearing more rumors about like potentially very large roster changes coming up, like roster rule changes. Which one of the issues for the Fire is like right now, you no matter how much he's sold for, the Fire could not replace him with a center back of comparable quality because just that's the way the cap works. I mean, they could move stuff around on the roster and use a DP for that. Ask FC Cincinnati. We'll talk about them in a couple days. How like using DP slots on center backs has panned out for them in the long run. Um, and so that's a challenge that like if that is changing at the same time, there's an offer when there's more teams shopping. I think that's more realistic. And in the winter, like most teams, like you're looking for that guy that's going to score a few more goals or like fix this like obvious problem you have, and that problem is not typically at center back that you're willing to lay out for in sort of like the small off window through most of Europe.
Yeah, no, agreed. And look, I think so. Two thoughts. One, maybe this is kind of where we wrap this part of the conversation. Like, I do think we also have to build in the fact that he is incredibly undersized for a center back. Incredibly is overselling it. He is undersized for a center back. That's not nothing, especially when you talk about who can realistically give you $15 million for a center back, which is what a lot of people are saying. Hey, could this be into eight figures? It could be. Who's paying $10-15 million for a center back? It's teams in England. It's teams maybe in Spain, maybe in Italy. And Italy's about to change pretty drastically with some of their financial regulations. The market is small, guys. Like that, I think that's important. Not that it's impossible, but then two, I'm curious to see. We saw him play a bit of midfield for South Africa. I'm curious if there are clubs that want him to make that change, and the Fire say, "Hey, we'll sell you if you want to go, but if you want to keep playing center back, you're welcome to stay here, and we'll pay you a bunch of money."
Yeah. And again, like the other thing behind all this, like I think it is worth saying, and this is something that was said about John Duran and his move especially, but there gets to be a point where players have professional goals. They love the game. I mean, some players it's a job, right? And like I think that those end up not being the players that a lot of people remember, but like for some players it's a job, and I guess on some level, like you're a professional, like that's fine, that's part of it. But for some it's something that they're passionate about. But there gets to be a point where when you look at being able to like materially change the conditions of like your family and all of your descendants and not just your immediate nuclear family, like your extended family forever, like that gets to be a point of like whatever, however much you may love doing something, it may not feel like the best choice, but it's not like you're asked to give it up. You're given another shot, and you don't become a pro athlete if you don't believe in betting on yourself. Metaphorically, not literally. Um, just to
Hopefully.
clarify. Yeah, hopefully. Um, yeah, no, predicting on yourself though. That's
Yeah. Market predicting on yourself,
oh
actually.
god, I hate that
That
word.
brings us to our
Anyways,
sponsor. No, I'm kidding. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the whiplash?
yeah, my neck would actually break off. Um, anyways, we move on. But yeah,
I
look,
think that
it's exciting to have a player like that to watch like this. Like I think he's not going to be here forever, so enjoy him while he's here. But I also don't think that his departure is imminent, and he's going to be someone like John Duran that like plays like 15 games for the Fire and
yeah.
moves on
I
somewhere else.
I do think it ends up being kind of a Gaga situation. Hopefully not in the long term, but if you told me after the sprint season he's sold and loaned back for a year, I could see it. Because at a certain point, you also have to ask the question of what's the development like? Where's he going to? Because frankly, if you're 22 and going to a top five, top five league, a top three league, you're probably not starting right away. But maybe you are. Who knows?
Well, yeah, and I mean that's also when teams want to get players in young too is the other side of it. But like I think that there's MLS is a very good development league, and I think Greg Berhalter especially has a reputation that few coaches have in terms of his development, and he's got connections with all kinds of people in Europe, and so does the
That's the
Fire's
key.
front office. It's not just Berhalter; it's Broughton. It's like everyone around them that I think when Greg Broughton says like, "No, we develop players the right way," I think that does a lot more than you know the what you hear from a lot of MLS teams and what you heard from MLS teams 5 years ago.
You mean to tell me that it isn't just about announcing that you've signed strategic partnership deals with Portuguese clubs? I was told the Cincinnati Porto deal was going to be massive for MLS, Tim. I
Every bit
predicted
as
so
massive as
many
the
markets
Fire's
based on
similar
this.
partnership deal that they had with Club America, and I want to say it was somebody crazy. It was like may have been PSG or somebody like that. It was yeah, and we all know the dividends that paid for the Fire.
So many. Look, I think that brings us to the end of the show here. Are we have any? Oh gosh, we haven't talked about Detroit City. Jesus. Yeah. Okay. So let's do it real quick. We don't. I mean, look, it's a USL Championship side in Open Cup. I think the big question is who's starting, right? Who's playing? We talked a little bit beforehand. I would say for me, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like, I'm I'm excited to hopefully see 65, 70 minutes of Sergio Orhel. I can't see a reason he wouldn't play in this game. But I'm really excited to see that. I hope we do. Who are you kind of keeping your eye on from that second tier of guys to start?
Yeah, look, Sergio Orhel was a normal starter last year, like at this stage of the season, and I am 99% sure he didn't start for the Fire last year. I think it was Kellen Acosta, Kwame, who I think everyone was still figuring out who Kwame was, and I think we still were by the end of 2025.
Still kind of am.
And actually, it was Jay Davila's first start for the Fire in any competition, obviously. So, we saw that last year. So, and like Greg played some normal starters. Hugo Kuiper started. He came off after the Fire kind of put the game away. Joe Bamba started. Zink wasn't there at all. Maren got the nod. So I think it's going to be a similar mix. I would hope that Sergio Orhel gets minutes. I mean, again, he's too good of a player to not be getting minutes somewhere. And like, this is just a way to work him back in a little bit. Like we even saw him, playing a little bit earlier in for Fire 2, and like he's above, like he has graduated from that level just given his performances in MLS. But I do respect the idea of him needing minutes to stay sharp. My question is, are we going to see a first start for somebody, or potentially, I mean, there could be Fire 2 players called up, but I think first start is more likely. And guys that you'd be looking at for that, I mean, Dylan Borso is a name. Like he played against the Crew for a lot of the game and looked really good. Victor Radojevic looked really impressive, and I'm not gonna lie, Victor Radojevic against just in Detroit's atmosphere, we've got a lot of fans that pride themselves on how tough they are before, you know, going back and teaching at the community college or whatever it is they do. Um, I think, man, Victor Radojevic opening a can of Serbia on them, I think would be hilarious.
Yeah, he would be a lot of fun to see. And look, USL Championship, it is a physical league. These are grown men, right? Like, especially Detroit, you mentioned before, a really stout defensive team. They are strong. They have, I mean, I don't have it in front of me. I believe they have an older roster. Like, this is not exactly a bunch of 17-year-olds being trotted out. You know what I mean?
And that's what you started to see a lot of in USL. Like you get a couple young players, but then you got a lot of players that are on the later end of their 20s or 30s. A lot of them have spent time in leagues around the world, like not top leagues, but like just playing the game professionally around the world. So they've got interesting experience and stories behind them. And I think that that's sort of what Detroit's roster is now. Darren Smith is Detroit's. So Detroit has 6 goals that they've scored so far in the year. They've only allowed 2, and that's 5 games into the season. So like they've always been a good defensive team. They are doing a little bit better than that this year. They've only scored multiple goals in one game, and that was Detroit or Brooklyn FC's first ever game on the road as a USL championship club. So there's that. But 5 of their 6 goals have been scored by Darren Smith, who is, by the way, their center forward from South Africa. So we could very well see some, South Africa versus South Africa action. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Mbokazi got to start, partly because he's young. I mean, and partly because like center back's just the game. You don't necessarily need to give them time off in the same way. Wouldn't surprise me if it was him with Joel though, just because of
That's
Jack's
what I was going to
recovery
say.
and
Yeah.
going 90. Yeah. But to me, the big question is: do you trust Jason Shukaluk with his first start for the Fire? Because the Hugo Kuipers isn't healthy. He started last year's game against Detroit, not healthy for this one. So, I think, and we've heard that he wasn't ready for a start. Like Greg told us that, and that's why we saw the team playing out of the 4-2-2-2 that we've seen. With whatever we talked about it enough. And look, that got Maren, some great moments, and like it's gotten the team 2 wins. I think you have to trust Jason Shukaluk, who's done so well at the third tier in the MLS Next Pro, well enough to get a golden boot and earn a first team deal. And I can get saying he's not ready for long minutes in the first team against first team opponents in the top flight, but against a second division team, I think you just have to trust him. And look, it's not like the Fire won't have the option to bring guys on off the bench and switch to that formation that we saw the past couple of weeks if it doesn't work.
I think Shukaluk's kind of a, I don't want to say a no-brainer because that's how you get proven wrong. It feels like a no-brainer, right? It's a guy who like
we're also a very anti-concussion podcast. Just
yes,
clear,
that is true. That is true. No, I think you said it well of like a guy who was great in the third division. What are 2 things Jason Shukaluk does very well? He's got great energy. He's got, a lot of the Tom Barlow-y things that Tom Barlow did well, right? The ability to press, the motor to stay on guys. And frankly, he can finish, right? Like he does have good awareness and good positioning around the goal. So I don't see why not. Now it's curious to see who they'll play with him, right? Because you start to look at the wing depth, and it's like, do you see Puso Ditejan play in his first game ever, or start in his first game, like play real meaningful minutes for the first time ever? Do you see Dylan Borso, Victor Radojevic? I would like to see that actually. As much as I am a Jonathan Dean guy, Dylan Borso is so much fun to watch. Like I'm curious to see what he could do against some of these guys, and yeah, I almost wonder if you could see kind of maybe more like a 3-4-3 or something like that, and play 3 center backs. Maybe get Jack Sandmeyer some time
Look,
just to see how he plays. It's curious.
I kind of doubt.
I think we'll see Christopher
that for
Cups
this
too
one.
at some point.
That's possible. I mean, I still think Joel, just because he hasn't had as many minutes, he like probably
Definitely will start. I agree.
But I think at this point the Fire don't have the center backs to be playing 3 center backs unless they absolutely have
Well,
to. And
that's why I said Jack Sandmeyer.
yeah, even like look, I'm just saying you're not that many injuries away from Jack Sandmeyer being a potential like needing to sign a first team deal or something like that situation. So like
If I've ever seen a more American looking Jack Elliott, it's Jack Sandmeyer. He looks like the American version. I don't know.
there are so many things that are funny about all this.
No, like,
but did he go? Was he a West Virginia Mountaineer? Because Jack Elliott.
No,
was.
He was a North Carolina Tar Heel, which is arguably the more American version of the West Virginia Mountaineer.
I love grading how American different states are. No,
you know what the fun part is about a podcast? You can just buy the mics and then say whatever you want.
And there's actually, did you know that you don't actually have to have any qualifications? In case that wasn't obvious from listening to this.
They just pulled me off the street. No.
Okay, closing this down. I sort of think, look, whoever Berhalter chooses to start, you have to just trust the guys will get the job done. Cup sets happen, and you have to respect that, and you have to respect how good of a defensive team Detroit is. But in the end, you have to expect that you'll be a lower division side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could say a lot of things about where this Fire team is. There's a lot of things I think would be unfair expectations. The most fair expectation possible is that you win this game, right? If you lose, it is a disaster for Greg Berhalter, and there will be, I don't want to say vitriol, but there will be a lot of criticism based around it, personally, and especially considering, frankly, how much the fans, and I think to his credit, Joe Mansueto too, care about the U.S. Open Cup, right? They want to be the first to 5. This is your maybe best chance to win a trophy this year. If you're going to waste it like that, that would be supremely disappointing, maybe even more so than some other potential downturns on the season.
Yeah, all fair.
Yeah, I think that's as good a place as any. Tim, do you want to give a prediction for the game against Detroit City FC and maybe who your spark is?
Why don't I just say Jason Chukaluk and 3-0?
I like that. 3-0's strong. I like it. I'm gonna go 2-0. And I like Viktor Radojevic in this game. I'm excited to see what he can do with some of those long balls, especially if we see like Maren running up top. I think that could be a lot of fun. So I like Vic. I like the Fire 2-0. I think it could be a goal on either side of that, right? It could be 3-0, could be 2-1, who knows? Yeah, but excited to see. In the meantime, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, tune into the game tonight. Let us know how it goes. Hopefully, we're all celebrating a U.S. Open Cup victory. If not, Tim and I will have a lot to talk about on Wednesday. From there, you can also stay tuned to the website, mentoring97.com. That's where you can find all the news, updates, analysis, all that kind of good stuff. We'll keep you posted as things break and come to light. Past that, you can stay tuned to social media, Men in Red 97, anywhere and everywhere that matters. We'll be covering soccer, talking about soccer, tweeting, sharing, all the good stuff so that you can stay informed on what we're up to and what we're doing. And then wherever you're listening, if you could give this a like, a thumbs up, a subscribe, and maybe a comment. If you're on YouTube, leave some comments. There's always like 2 or 3 people in there, and we really appreciate it. But I would love it if it was like 5 or 6 people in there. So if this YouTube video gets 5 comments, we'll send somebody a sticker. There we go. We have stickers still, I think. So yeah, there you go. If you want a sticker, you got to comment on YouTube. No, but seriously, if you could follow and subscribe and like wherever you're listening, it does go a long way just in terms of improving the reach. And last but not least, thank you so much for being here. It means the world to have folks listening. We're excited to continue on this journey of 2026 Chicago Fire football with you. So for our illustrious producer, Austin, for Tim, and for myself, John, thank you so much for joining us around the bonfire. And come on, you Men in Red.